Okay, hi guys. I just want to talk quickly about punch needle rug making or pillow making or whatever you want to make with it. Let's talk about how to use the punch needle. So as you can see, I have done, I don't know, a decent amount of this rug here, and this is the back. So I just wanted to make a quick video talking about how I do this, and if you want to do it, what you need or what you need to do, etc. So first, let me just show you what I am physically working on. So my rug is this sort of canvas-like fabric. It's not exactly canvas. If I remember what it's called, I'll write it on the screen somewhere. It's basically a sort of loose weave fabric. It's not super loose though. It still has some tightness to the weaves that you can poke through that will hold the stitches. But this fabric is stretched and stapled onto a canvas stretcher as if you're gonna make a giant painting. This is not necessary per se. However, you need something where the fabric can stay really taut because this is actually really loose and it started out really taut. And so when I keep retightening it, you can see this line is a little wonky, and it used to be up here. So I have to keep pulling it. And at this point, I'm just kind of working with it at this sort of stage of tautness, which is not super taut. I'm just working with it. But all that being said, you could use an embroidery hoop if you want to do something smaller, or if you have a really big embroidery hoop. I don't know, whatever. If you want to use an embroidery hoop or something like that, you can. However, you're just gonna have to retighten it a lot. And I mean, if you want to do that to just try it out, or, as an experiment, or you don't mind having to retighten it, that's totally viable. And then that's how you could be doing your project. And of course, they have actual rug stretchers that you can buy that are for punch needle work. That's, an investment. And if you don't want to have to build your own canvas, you can go buy canvases, or even if you go to a thrift store and buy paintings, or those printed canvases that are on large canvases, and you cut off the how many times can I say canvas, and cut off the canvas so that you're just left with the wood frame. Totally do that. That would be awesome, and I actually used these thumbtacks for when it was getting really loose, and I didn't want to have to use a staple gun again because I didn't have it. And that actually worked really well. Okay, so we have the framing situation, the fabric situation. Let's talk about the yarn. So I found that acrylic yarn works pretty well for this, but do be warned, it's kind of stiff, and it's not the softest and most luxuriously beautiful fabric yarn you can use. And I mean, depending on what you're using this for, I mean, that could be fine. I don't know, live your best life. I had some wool yarn that was a lot like this, actually. So I had this wool yarn, and it looked like this before. I had actually unraveled it from a scarf, and that was pretty easy. You can look up videos on how to unravel sweaters, or, all that stuff on YouTube, and it gives you a pretty good example. And so then I dyed this with turmeric, and it ended up being manhandled quite a bit. And it ended up having, as you can see, this sort of uneven weight to it. This made it impossible to use for the particular needle that I have, because my punch needle, and I will pull it out here and show you, the hole itself is really quite small, and this is thicker. And because there were different weights, parts of it would get stuck in it, and I was not able to pull it through. But I think if I had a bigger punch needle, which they have multiple different sizes, I think if I had a bigger one, this would probably go through, decently easily. Since I do not have access to a larger one, and I have to work with what I have, I wasn't able to use this this yarn. So you just need to be mindful of the punch needle you have and the yarn you have, and if they're not compatible, then you're gonna have to either buy new yarn or a new needle. So you do have to be mindful of that. That was actually quite frustrating to figure out, because I spent all day trying to figure out that yarn and make it beautiful, and of course I used it for something else, but it was a little sad to figure that out. So great, now you have your objects that you need, your little yarn situation. Let's talk about actually doing it. So I will show you guys how to thread this in a bit. I'm just gonna not do that right now since I have one hand and it's already threaded. What we're gonna want to do is you want to stab it in this way down with the side with the yarn facing up at all times. And so you're gonna push down all the way until you can't push anymore. And then since I'm turning here, we're gonna change the directions. Push it all the way down, come out, and you're gonna go not very far at all. And you don't want to pull it fully out. You do not want to, go in and go like that. And if you do something like that, you're just gonna have to pull back that yarn, go in, and you're just gonna keep doing that all the way in until you can't go in anymore. Move over just a little bit. Turning while it's still down. And so you're gonna also want to make sure that your yarn is always out of the way. If you are, doing this and you hold down part of it, or, it's under your elbow, I'll show you what will happen is you'll be stabbing and it's not going to go anywhere, and instead you'll have maybe stabbed 6 times and have just one thread. So you'll have to take that out. And then, just pull your yarn back. Sorry, I'm doing this all with one hand. Pull your yarn back and you just gotta keep going. So you just have to make sure that you have your yarn just kind of out. So I have mine wrapped around this, and when I get closer to around here, then I unwind to the next thing, just kind of leave it there, and just kind of keep going. You want to make sure that you're going as close to the previous line as you can, because if you have, for example, this empty space, when you turn it around, it will be visibly thinner there, and you likely do not want that. So this is the back, right? You work from the back. Let's turn it around and see what that looks like. Yay, it's a rug. So that's where the needle is right now, obviously, and so these are little loops that it makes. So you're making a series of loops that, because they're so close together and because it's really going into a moderately tight weave, it holds itself together, which is great. It is easy to pull one part and just kind of, it's really easy to do that. So you want to be careful to not do that if you don't want to do that. It's also easy to just go back and redo it. So it's not a big deal if I just, undid that line, but do be aware that that can happen. You're also going to want to leave a border around here, because this is where you're going to sew the edges at the end. Now, I think actually what I'm going to do, and I can update you guys later, is I think I'm actually going to punch in until the edge and then sew over that. I think I'm going to do it that way just so that the thickness is all equal, and I'm going to use thread for that rather than yarn. So when you are done with a row or whatever and you want to move on, you're going to hold your yarn and pull, because if you pull the whole thing, you're going to undo these lines. You want to keep the yarn exactly where it is. And then you're just going to snip it. There you go. Okay, so for me, I find that threading the punch needle is the hardest part of the whole ordeal. So let me just unthread this so I can show you. Because usually the ends are kind of thick. So what I like to do is roll it as much as I can. And actually, I feel like if you guys do like sewing or embroidery or anything, and you find that the end of the thread, it ends up getting like this one thin thread that is actually really annoying to try to thread with. If you see at the very top here, it's like super thin, just like one tiny piece. I actually find that super useful for threading the punch needle, because That's like the one part that actually will go through. Sorry, I'm trying to hold this with the hand that's holding the phone, so I apologize that it's out of focus. But it usually takes me a couple tries to get it in. And so usually it's that tiny little part of the rolled thread that will actually end up going through. Cool. And then you're going to want to pull out a decent amount of yarn here, because you're going to have to, this is hard to do with one hand, push down this yarn, and you're going to have to pull it into place here. So this is why you have the tail at the end here. Sorry, it's hard to do with one hand. There you go. So now it is threaded. You have that overhang here, which you also need so it doesn't just slip out, and the rest of it is in here. And it is connected to the entire spool of yarn so that you can just keep going. And that's that. Troubleshooting. All right, so you're making your marks, right? And the whole thing is just going, just keeps undoing itself. You may need to hold down the tail of the yarn, because that was just happening to me a couple times. You may need to make sure you kind of floss out the yarn to make sure that there are no uneven weights, because if it's getting caught in the hole of the needle, then it's not going to be moving. It just needs to have complete freedom to move. That's what the yarn needs. It needs like nothing in its way. And then you should just be able to keep going. So hopefully I gave some answers to people who were wondering about the process of using a punch needle, or wanting to start working on it themselves and kind of didn't know where to begin or didn't know what materials you might need. I hope this was helpful, and if you have more questions about it, obviously just hit me up, let me know, and hopefully I can answer them for you, or I can kind of just lead you in the right direction of somebody who can answer it for you. And I hope this was helpful, or at least kind of just cool to watch.